Hey guys, tonight we trudge into snowdrifts, soup pots, and survival tactics in the frozen village. It's deep winter now. The sky is a colorless sheet. The wind bites through every gap in your patched tunic, and even the chickens seem to have stopped clucking out of spite. You're standing at the edge of your village, wooden buildings hunched under snow like tired old men. The air smells of wet straw, smoke, and the kind of damp wool that never really dries. There's a dog barking somewhere, probably at nothing. It's too cold for burglars. You're a medieval villager, not a noble, not a knight. Just one of the many trying to make it through another winter without starving, freezing, or accidentally angering the local lord by sneezing too close to his hunting path. This isn't the cheery holiday card version of winter. This is real medieval winter. The one with rats in the grain bin and frost on your blanket. The one where, if you didn't spend your summer wisely, you're going to find out what boiled shoe leather tastes like. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, comment where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the little bedtime map we build together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up under a sagging thatched roof, breath visible in the air like a ghost escaping your lungs. The first sound is your mother stoking the hearth, wood clinking, the faint hiss of damp ash. The hearth is always the first priority. Without it, nothing else matters. There's no central heating, no heated floors, just one fire to heat the whole house, and it has to be managed carefully. Too small, and you all freeze. Too large, and you burn precious fuel you might need in February. And heaven forbid the smoke doesn't draft right. You'll spend the day coughing like a goat with a grudge. The first job today? Make sure the fire didn't go out. If it did, you're trudging to a neighbor's house to beg a hot coal off them. That's if they like you. Historians still argue whether fire sharing was a formal village custom or just an awkward social dance you had to perform with a basket and your most apologetic face. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is some cold porridge left over from last night. If you're unlucky, it's just cold water and a good scowl. The bread is hard as a bishop's conscience, and the butter is, well, theoretical. You chew slowly, not because it's delicious, but because you need to make it last. Outside, the world is hushed. Snow makes everything quieter, except your stomach. The roads, more like dirt paths, are frozen hard, turning every chore into a bone-rattling walk. You need water, so you grab the wooden bucket and crunch your way toward the well, scarf wound around your mouth. One mitten is missing. Someone probably used it to plug a drafty wall again. And there it is, the well. Covered with a crude wooden lid and a sheet of ice you'll have to crack with your elbow. You draw the bucket, careful not to let it clatter too loudly. Sound carries far in winter. You never know if someone or something is listening. Back at home, your younger siblings are squabbling under the straw-stuffed blankets. Your older brother is outside splitting logs with a borrowed axe that has personality, meaning it's chipped and hates you. You remember last summer how your family rushed to gather enough firewood. Those long days in the forest, dragging branches, stacking piles. If you didn't collect enough, well, nobody wants to be the peasant knocking on the Reeves' door in January, begging for fuel. And if you're truly desperate, You might burn dried dung. It's not glamorous, but it's warm. And in winter, that counts as luxury. By midday, your fingers are raw. Your boots, if you have any, are wet. And lunch is more a suggestion than a meal. Maybe a few boiled turnips or onions from last year's garden. Meat? That's a Yule dream. You're lucky if the pig you raised wasn't sold for rent payment. Though there is that dried sausage hanging from the rafters, it's more like decoration at this point. You're not touching it until you can't feel your toes. Despite everything, there's a kind of rhythm to this life. The cold teaches you what matters: a good fire, a sealed roof, friends with decent mittens, and jokes. Surprisingly, jokes matter. You crack one about old Farmer Till, whose beard froze mid-sneeze last week. It wasn't funny then, but now it's hilarious. Someone else says he saw his shadow and fled back into his barn like a hedgehog. You laugh until your nose runs. You might be poor, but winter makes kings of those with humor and dry socks. Mostly humor. As evening falls, the light fades fast. Candles are expensive, so you rely on the fire's glow. Outside, the snow reflects the last pink streaks of daylight, and you brace for another long night. You huddle close with your family, dogs, goats, and possibly a confused chicken joining in the warmth. The wind howls. You hear it rattle the shutters, whispering strange things in the dark. Someone once said it was the voices of hungry spirits looking for open chimneys. You pretend not to believe it, because it's easier that way. You learned long ago, wood isn't just a resource, it's survival, status, and sanity. Back in summer, while others dreamed lazily in the hayfields, you were trudging into the forest with a dull hatchet and a cart that veers left for no good reason. Every able body in your family helped. Even the smallest children could haul branches. Firewood gathering wasn't optional, it was insurance, the kind that, if neglected, left you with frostbite and regret by Candlemas. You remember the rules well. Fresh-cut wood is heavy and wet. It smokes like a bishop's sermon and burns about as well. So, you don't just chop, you cure, stacking it neatly under overhangs or in little lattice towers to dry out months in advance. Oak, ash, and hazel, mostly. Poplar burns fast. Pine, sticky, smoky, but better than nothing. If you're lucky, there's a little birch. It smells sweet, like something clean. Not that anything in your house is truly clean in winter. Now, in deep January, you're eyeing those stacks like a squirrel counting acorns. Each log you throw on the fire is a little mental math problem. Will this keep the baby warm long enough for the soup to finish? Do we burn 2 now and 1 later? Or freeze now and regret it at midnight? Historians still argue whether rural villages had communal wood banks or relied strictly on household stores. The truth was likely a mix. You'd trade a bundle of sticks for favors, food, even gossip. A neighbor might borrow a log and repay you next season with a jar of preserved berries, assuming they lived that long. And if you were too old or sick to gather wood, well, hopefully your family loved you, or the parish did. Otherwise, you might end up sitting close to the fire, very close, because that's where everyone piled their regrets. Inside the cottage, every surface holds a reminder of the summer harvest. Dried herbs hang like limp wind chimes from the beams. A squirrel skull someone found is wedged into a crack, its empty eyes watching over the kindling basket. Your father swears it's good luck. You're not so sure. You split another log, this time carefully. The axe is dull. You've been meaning to sharpen it, but the grindstone froze last week. Besides, if you chip the blade again, your uncle will scold you loudly. He's not a pleasant man in any season, but winter brings out the particular poetry in his complaints. There's a rhythm to the work. Chop, split, stack. Your fingers sting, then go numb. Your breath fogs and freezes on your eyelashes. But there's a quiet pride in it, too. Every piece of firewood you add to the pile is a small, defiant "not today" to the cold. And oh, the cold, not just outside, but inside. Your house is a blend of frost and smoke, with the hearth trying its best like a tired, underpaid teacher. The heat rarely reaches your toes, or your mother's. She still wears 3 aprons and wraps her feet in old linen, muttering something about saints who walk barefoot through the snow. But you manage. Everyone manages, in their own stubborn way. One quirky old tradition still circles the village every year, the warmth charm. Some swear by stuffing bits of warm iron into their boots. Others carry a tiny pouch of ash from the Yule fire in their pocket to keep the chill from climbing your spine. Most of it's superstition, of course, but then again, you're not exactly drowning in medical options if the cold settles too deep in your chest. Tonight, the fire crackles low. You gather close, slowly rotating like bread on a spit. Your sister holds her palms out and hisses when the warmth finally hits them. The dog thumps its tail once, then curls tighter. You try not to look at the shrinking log pile. It's only midwinter. February always comes for what you thought would last. Someone tells a story, half true, mostly nonsense, about a woman who fed her fire with broken chair legs all the way through Lent. You laugh, then eye your own bench warily. As you close the shutter for the night, your fingers graze the frost creeping in along the wood. It feels alive, somehow, intentional, a quiet enemy that never really sleeps. But you do, eventually, because tiredness is the one luxury medieval winter gives freely. You settle under stiff blankets and scratchy wool, one last ember glowing in the hearth like a sleepy eye. Tomorrow you'll split more wood, or trade for it, or beg it. Either way, the fire must live, because if it dies, well, you know better than to let that happen. You're wearing everything you own, and it still isn't enough. Dressing for winter in a medieval village isn't about fashion, it's about friction. It's about how many layers you can pull on before you can no longer bend your knees. There are no zippers, no insulated lining, and no heated socks that plug into anything. What you have is wool, lots of it. Scratchy, damp-smelling, soul-scraping wool. The first layer is usually a linen shift or tunic, if you're lucky enough to have one that hasn't torn at the shoulder. Over that goes another tunic, then maybe a third. The layering system isn't about style. It's about trapping what little body heat you have like a miser hoarding coins. Every inch of you is wrapped, stuffed, or tied in something. Even your head is bundled because the idea that most heat escapes through it might not be medically accurate. But it sure feels true. Wool leggings, if you own them, are patched and sagging. And if you don't, you improvise. You've seen neighbors wrap their legs with scraps of old cloth, leather thongs, or even dried reeds in desperation. Boots are rarer than you think. Many villagers wear wooden clogs or thick-soled shoes lined with straw. Yes, straw. Because it's surprisingly good at insulation, even if it makes you sound like you're carrying a nest. There's always one person in the village who wears something odd. This winter, it's old Egbert, who stitched a badger pelt to his cloak and now insists it gives him fierce warmth. You're not sure what that means, but the badger's glassy-eyed face makes a dramatic entrance wherever he goes. As for cloaks, everyone has one, or something pretending to be one. Some are made of felted wool, others old blankets repurposed with bone toggles and divine hope. The real prize is fur. If your family has a bit of rabbit or squirrel fur lining your collar, you walk taller, not warmer necessarily, just prouder. One woman in the next hamlet swears by a cloak lined with goose down, but nobody's seen her geese since. Historians still argue whether peasants regularly wore fur, or if that's more medieval myth than reality. Some evidence suggests fur was more common among the well-off, while others argue that villagers used whatever they could catch. Either way, you've definitely seen people trying and sometimes failing to tan pelts in their gardens. You'll never forget the stench. Getting dressed in the morning is a group activity, mostly because it's a wrestling match. You grunt, wiggle, and shimmy into your layers while someone holds your sleeve, trying not to laugh. Children get bundled like root vegetables, arms out sideways, waddling toward the hearth like anxious ducklings. There's a sort of comedy to it. You have to laugh, otherwise you might cry when you realize you put your tunic on backward again, and taking it off feels like peeling skin. But once you're dressed, you can at least function, sort of. You step outside and the cold smacks you like a rude relative. Your breath fogs instantly. Your eyelashes try to freeze together. You tuck your chin into your scarf and mutter a few curses, quietly. Cursing the wind is fair game. Cursing the Lord Steward is not. The walk to the next house, maybe for water or gossip or to borrow a skillet, takes 5 times longer than it should. You trudge. Every step squeaks on the frozen snow. Your cloak snags on a bramble. You trip, curse again, and nearly lose a mitten. It's always the mitten. And still, despite all your preparation, cold finds its way in, through the seams, through the holes, through that spot at the base of your spine your clothes never quite cover. It's personal, the way it sneaks in. Vindictive. But everyone looks ridiculous, so at least you're not alone. Bundled peasants shuffle past, hunched like question marks, eyes peeking from under hoods. No one walks quickly, it just causes more drafts. One man wears 2 hats. Another has stuffed linen in his ears. Your cousin has turned her shawl into what looks like a giant cocoon. She insists she's warmer. She also hasn't turned her head in days. Inside again, you strip the outer layers only reluctantly. Cloaks get hung by the door, hopefully not too close to the fire. Last year, someone's fur caught an ember, and let's just say the cloak is gone, but the story lives forever. And at night, oh, the layering continues. You sleep fully clothed, often with tomorrow's outfit already on. It's not laziness, it's self-preservation. You wrap yourself in whatever you can. Wool blankets, animal skins, cloaks, and if things get really desperate, the family dog. Or 2. You don't judge. Some folks swear by heated stones, pulled from the hearth and wrapped in cloth, placed at your feet. Others warm bricks. One particularly crafty neighbor uses a hollow gourd filled with coals. Carefully, of course. Nothing ruins a bed faster than surprise fire. And even then, you're still cold. You shift constantly, trying to find that one warm pocket of air. You tuck your hands between your legs. You breathe into your scarf. Someone snores. Someone else farts. A baby cries. It's all very rustic. But eventually, your body forgets it's cold. Or maybe it just gives up. You drift into sleep, swaddled in wool and winter silence. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Layer, trudge, unlayer, and sleep in yesterday's sweat. Because in the medieval winter, warmth is an endless game of chase. And you're always just one log, one cloak, one pair of stolen mittens behind. The hearth isn't just where you cook. It's where you live. It's where you breathe, eat, sleep nearby, argue with your siblings, and squint into the flames like they might whisper secrets if you just stare long enough. Everything in the house is organized around it, even if organized is a generous term. And in winter, it becomes your entire world. Your family's hearth is modest, just a rough stone basin with a blackened iron hook for the cooking pot and a few tiles to catch the worst of the sparks. The smoke curls upward, finding its way out through the thatch and wood beams. Supposedly, on a good day, it mostly does. On a bad day, you sit blinking through a smoky haze that makes you feel like you've offended a minor fire spirit. In wealthier homes or longhouses, the hearth might be set into the floor with a proper chimney flue. But in your world, the chimney is basically a hole that hopefully points up. Historians still argue whether most cottages had proper chimneys before the late Middle Ages or just relied on openings in the thatch. Judging by your ceiling, it's the latter. You've developed a sixth sense for when soot is about to fall. Lighting the fire each morning is a sacred, annoying ritual. You start with dry kindling, if you remembered to keep some under the stool the night before, a bit of old linen, some brittle straw. Then you reach for the flint and steel. There's a satisfying click, then a spark, then a small curse when it doesn't catch. Eventually, a wisp of smoke curls up and you whisper encouragement to it like it's a skittish animal. The hearth gives you more than heat. It gives you food, assuming you have any. A stew pot is usually swinging from the iron hook, its contents questionable but hot. Root vegetables mostly. Maybe a shred of salted meat if you're celebrating something. Like Thursday, the taste isn't memorable, but the warmth? That's priceless. You cradle the bowl in your hands like a relic. The first spoonful burns your tongue, but you welcome it. It's one of the few things that reminds your insides they're still alive. You hear the fire before you feel it, the quiet popping of sap in the logs, the hiss of moisture boiling out of the wood. Occasionally, a spark leaps and dies on the stone floor. It's hypnotic, comforting, but also dangerous. You learned that the hard way when your cousin knocked over the iron pot and poured half-boiled leek water directly onto her leg. She screamed, the dog barked, and the house smelled like burnt onion for a week. Now, you step carefully. Everything around the fire is sacred ground and occasionally cursed. People take their seats around it like chess pieces. The old ones get the warmest spots. Children hover like moths, sticking their feet as close as they dare before a parent shoos them back. You sit on your heels, half frozen, half drowsy, trying not to think about how long until bedtime. Every now and then, you hear a log shift. The embers glow brighter, then dim. You poke them with a stick, not because they need it, but because you do. It's your job tonight to keep it going while your father trades stories with the neighbor about a fox that supposedly cursed a cow. You're pretty sure that's not how curses work, but who's going to argue? There are quirks to firekeeping. You never let it go out. Unless you're okay with waking up with ice on your blanket, you stir the coals before sleep, bank them under ashes to keep them alive until morning. If done right, you can coax a flame from those coals with a few breaths and a prayer to St. Bridget, who, according to local tradition, always had the warmest hearth. There's an old belief that hearths have spirits, not full-blown ghosts, but little guardians that punish laziness and reward good firewood stacking. You half believe it. Last winter, when you forgot to sweep the ashes properly, the fire spat at you for a week. Coincidence? Maybe, but you sweep now, religiously. The hearth also acts as your village newsletter. Gossip spreads fastest when bellies are full and hands are idle. Tonight, there's talk of a new baby born 2 houses down, and that he came out already scowling like he knew what winter was. There's debate about whether widow Eleonora's hens are actually laying eggs or she's just stealing from the church coop again. No one can prove it, but we all suspect. While the fire burns, time slows. You peel a turnip absent-mindedly. Your aunt hums a lullaby that only has 2 lines and endless repetition. Someone near the fire dozes off, snoring softly. A dog farts. Life goes on. Outside, the wind howls against the shutters like a bitter traveler locked out. Inside, the fire makes you forget, just for a moment, that the world is a frozen, uncertain place. You close your eyes, feel the heat against your cheeks, and let yourself drift. Not to sleep, not yet, but just far enough to forget the holes in your shoes and the wet patch on the ceiling and the ever-dwindling wood pile. The fire's alive, and for tonight, that's enough. There's a certain silence in the barn this morning, the kind that says even the animals have given up pretending it's tolerable. You pull the door open, and the rush of cold air that greets you smells of hay, old fur, and manure that's too frozen to be properly offensive. It's still dark out, but you got chores. Winter doesn't care about your sleep schedule. The animals are quieter now than in summer, less restless, less willing to argue. The chickens barely cluck. The goats eye you like you personally scheduled the snowstorm. The pigs, well, the pigs are the ones having the hardest time. Keeping livestock alive through a medieval winter is a full-time, high-stakes game. You've already lost 2 chickens this season, and there's still a debate over whether they froze or just gave up. You don't blame them. The coop's drafty, the feed's dwindling, and nobody wants to lay eggs when the world is covered in ice. The cows are huddled in a corner, sides steaming gently in the cold. You pat one on the flank. It grumbles, but doesn't move. You grew up with these animals. You name them sometimes, quietly, not out of sentimentality, but out of habit. You try not to get too attached, though. Naming a pig Buttercup just makes things harder when Buttercup becomes sausage. You toss some hay into the trough, careful to spread it evenly. Hay is precious, almost as precious as the animals themselves. You remember the long summer days cutting, drying, and storing it in neat stacks in the loft. Now, every mouthful they eat is one less day. You can push off a hard decision, because here's the thing about winter. Sometimes there isn't enough to go around. Historians still argue whether villagers routinely culled animals in early winter to save resources or tried to stretch supplies through to spring. In your village, the answer is both. Some years, you get lucky. Other years, the early frost comes before the last harvest. Then choices have to be made. You try not to think about that today. Instead, you focus on the routine. You break the ice in the water trough, you clear out old straw, and lay down some fresh bedding, more to lift the smell than anything. You check the goats for signs of illness. They eye you like they're suspicious of your motives. They're not wrong. One fringe practice some villagers swear by is the use of warm ale to keep livestock hardy. You tried that last year? The results were mixed. One goat got oddly affectionate. The cow just sneezed in your face. There's a peculiar joy in the barn, though. It's warmer than the house sometimes, thanks to body heat and packed straw. You sit on an upturned bucket, hands wrapped around a clay mug of weak broth. The cat that lives in the hayloft watches you with its usual judgment. You've named it Mittens, mostly for irony. Its paws are filthy. Your father used to say, the animals eat first or they don't eat at all. And it's true. They're your wealth, your sustenance, your heating system in a sense. Even the pigs, foul as they are, offer warmth if you're desperate enough. You've known a neighbor or two to nap in the pig shed on brutally cold days. It's not glamorous, but it's warm. And pigs are surprisingly cuddly if you don't move too fast. Some villages keep livestock in the house itself during winter, especially if the family is poor or the animals are few. You tried that once with a goat who insisted on eating part of the rushes off the floor and then relieving itself on your cousin's blanket. That was the end of that experiment. Still, there's a strange peace to this work. You know the rhythm. Feed, clean, check for frostbite on ears or tails, talk to them softly. It helps, even if they don't understand. One of the cows moos in response, probably telling you to close the door, you fool. And outside, the snow keeps falling. You trudge back toward the house, feet numb, the bucket bumping against your leg. The sunrise hasn't fully appeared, but the horizon has a glow like a hearth under ash. Smoke curls from a dozen cottage roofs, each one signaling life, effort, and another family trying to make it through. As you enter your home again, brushing snow from your shoulders, the warmth of the hearth greets you with a sleepy welcome. The others are just stirring. The dog growls in his sleep. Someone coughs. Your mother ladles out breakfast, thin but hot. You sip it, eyes still half on the barn, already thinking about tonight's feeding. You know the wind will pick up later, that the chickens will huddle so tight they look like one bird, that the pig will knock over the water trough again, and you'll deal with it, because this is winter, and winter doesn't wait. There's a game you play in your head every afternoon, bread or broth tonight. It's less about choice and more about inventory. You mentally run through the cellar shelves, the sacks under the bed, the root basket behind the door. Then you look outside at the hard, frozen earth and sigh. Winter meals in a medieval village are not feasts. They are strategies. By now, your preserved stores are shrinking daily. What's left must stretch until the first green pokes through the thaw, and that could be weeks or months away. So you sit, frown at a shriveled carrot, and try to conjure dinner out of ingenuity and hope. Tonight's options? A hard hunk of barley bread, a bowl of cabbage broth, and maybe a sliver of lard. You carefully sniff a bit of dried onion, still edible, but only just. The bread is older than the gossip about the tanner's new apprentice, and that's saying something, but you'll soak it in the broth. If you're lucky, you'll be able to chew it with both sides of your mouth. Historians agree that grains were the foundation of most medieval diets, especially in winter. Barley, rye, and oats were staples. Wheat was for the wealthy. Your bread is dense and dark, less a fluffy loaf and more a brick with ambition. It doesn't mold easily, which is both a blessing and a worry. If it does mold, you just slice that part off and carry on. Penicillin hasn't been invented yet, but your stomach is already halfway there. There's a sack of dried peas in the corner. You eye it like it owes you money. Legumes are a godsend in winter, but they take forever to cook. You have to soak them overnight, and fuel is tight. Still, tomorrow's meal might feature pea porridge if the weather holds. Again, as you chop the last turnip, your younger brother wanders by and casually mentions that he saw a squirrel in the forest this morning. You both pause. It's illegal to hunt game on the Lord's land, but squirrels are ambiguous. Are they game? Are they pests? Are they dinner if no one finds out? You both agree silently to forget the conversation ever happened. You set the pot on the fire, stirring the thin broth with a stick that's earned honorary spoon status. The pot itself is cracked, but it's been patched with wire and prayer. The fire sputters, but holds. The house starts to smell of warm cabbage and smoky hope. Dinner is served in wooden bowls, each one a little different. Some are chipped. One is technically a cup. The dog eyes everyone with theatrical despair. You break off a crumb for him. He deserves it. He ate a mouse yesterday. Probably saved someone's grain. Everyone eats quietly. Not because they're sad, though it's hard not to be wistful for spring, but because chewing frozen bread takes focus. Someone murmurs that the meal is lovely. It's not, but it's hot, and that counts. You remember last year's milk root stew. A neighbor swore the roots tasted like parsnips. They didn't. They tasted like spicy dirt. You were hungry enough to eat 2 bowls. There's a story about a village a few days' walk from yours that once roasted a shoe. Boiled it first, then roasted it. The leather softened, apparently. You don't want to find out, but still, you look at your shoes sometimes, just in case. Food isn't just fuel here. It's currency. Bartered, hoarded, celebrated. A good loaf of bread is a ticket to favor. A pot of stew makes you popular. Your aunt once traded a single apple for 2 nights' worth of firewood. It was a really good apple. Quirky winter traditions survive around food, too. Your neighbor still buries a jar of honey in the snow every January to sweeten February. Another family roasts chestnuts and tells stories about why beans must never be counted aloud. Something about fairies, debts, and 3 unlucky goats. Tonight, someone sneaks a surprise into the pot, a sliver of dried sausage from the rafters. It's tough as old rope, but tastes like joy. You all pretend not to notice the meat, but the silence shifts. People eat faster. Smiles flicker at the corners of mouths. And then there's the treat. A little hard cheese. Not much, but enough to nibble. You chew slowly, trying to make it last, pretending you're a lord for just a minute. Cheese has become rare. Most milk is saved for infants or boiled into porridge. You dream of butter. You've had it twice in the last 6 months. As the bowl's empty, conversation rises. Not much. Just a few comments about the weather, a poorly told joke about a priest and a goat, and whether the turnip thief ever got caught. Spoiler, no, he got married instead. Afterwards, you wash the bowls with snow, then wipe them out with straw. It's not sanitary, but it's what you have. Clean enough. You tuck the last crust of bread into a cloth and place it high on a shelf, like a prayer. You'll need it tomorrow. You sleep in your clothes. Everyone does. It's not a question of modesty or convenience. It's about not waking up colder than when you went to bed. The blankets aren't enough, and the straw mattress barely counts as insulation. You curl your legs in, pull your cloak over your chest, and wedge your icy feet somewhere between the dog and your sibling's lower back. The nights are long, really long. In winter, darkness swallows more than half the day. You fall asleep early, wake up in the dark, think it must be morning, only to find it's still 3 hours to dawn. So you shift, reposition, and try again. The straw mattress pokes you relentlessly. It's old, hasn't been changed since Michaelmas, maybe longer. You can smell the mold, the occasional mouse nest, and the faint whiff of cabbage that somehow clings to everything in the house. You try not to think about it. You try to focus on the warmth, what little there is. The dog is a surprisingly crucial part of this equation. She curls at your feet like a furry stove, sighing heavily and twitching in dreams. If she leaves, your toes will notice. If you're smart, you'll let her take the best spot and thank her for it. You remember that one winter when the dog got sick. You spent weeks shivering and regretting every joke you ever made about lazy mutts. There's a family chamber pot tucked under the bed. You stare at it with silent loathing. Getting up to use it in the freezing dark is a delicate negotiation between pride, discomfort, and logistics. The floor is cold, the air colder, and trying not to spill anything is a minigame you never wanted to play. Midnight pee breaks are their own special torment. The cold hits like a slap the moment you wriggle free of the covers. You shuffle barefoot across icy planks, trying not to wake anyone. One creak in the floor and your aunt will groan dramatically. You try to aim quietly, fail. The dog opens one eye. You mumble an apology and return to the straw colder than before and probably damper too. And still, somehow, you fall asleep. Sleep in winter is not restful. It's segmented, interrupted, oddly vivid. You dream of summer, of green fields, warm bread, and sandals. Sometimes you wake with your teeth chattering so hard you think you've been cursed. Sometimes your sibling has rolled on top of you, hogging the only dry part of the blanket. A small battle ensues. You win, mostly through stubbornness. Historians still argue whether medieval people slept in one continuous block or followed the first sleep, second sleep pattern, 2 chunks of rest with a waking period in between. You're inclined to believe the latter. You're up enough in the night to have invented 3 new constellations and half a lullaby. And during those waking hours, some people pray, others mend clothes or tend the fire. You mostly just stare at the rafters, counting drips from the snowmelt above. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. Then the drip again. It's oddly soothing, like a very lazy metronome. Your mother snores softly from the corner. Someone farts. The fire crackles once and goes quiet again. It's not peace exactly, but it's close enough. There's one heavy blanket for the whole bed. It smells like goat and old stories. You pull it tighter, wrapping your arms around yourself like a burrito of quiet desperation. Outside, the wind moans around the doorframe. It sounds like voices sometimes. You try not to listen too hard. One of your sisters talks in her sleep. Nothing helpful, just mutterings about cheese and a missing shoe. Once, she sat bolt upright and declared, The bishop's cow is a liar, then laid back down as if nothing had happened. The next morning, no one even asked. You can't remember the last time you truly woke up warm. Morning always starts the same, with a reluctant eye peeking out from under the blanket, assessing how much snow got in. Your breath is visible in the air. Your fingers ache just from flexing. You delay movement as long as possible, hoping someone else will brave the floorboards first. Eventually, someone does. There's always one heroic soul who grunts, swings their legs out, and does the morning fire check. If it's gone out, a round of blaming and groaning begins. If the embers survive, that person is a household legend for about an hour. Your first steps of the day are stiff and unwilling. Your feet slide into boots that never really dry. Your back cracks in ways that feel both necessary and concerning. You throw on an extra shawl and trudge to the hearth like a pilgrim approaching a shrine. But here's the thing. You get used to it. You get used to the cold, the smells, the scratchy linens, the awkward bedmates. You learn to drift asleep in stages, to find warmth in tiny miracles. A hand under a blanket, a dog's sigh, a lingering ember. It's not comfort, but it's survival. And occasionally, it even feels like something close to home. The days are cold, but the nights stretch like melted wax, long, slow, and oddly echoing. And as the darkness creeps in before the stew's even done bubbling, there's only one thing left to fill the silence: stories. You're sitting around the hearth again, legs wrapped in a blanket that used to be a curtain, passing a wooden cup of something vaguely warm. The fire flickers. The air smells of soot and boiled onions. And someone says the words you've been waiting for. Did I ever tell you the one about the knight who lost his trousers? Thus begins another night of tales, tunes, and the kind of half-remembered legends that blur the line between history, exaggeration, and total invention. This is how medieval villagers survive winter evenings, by leaning hard into communal storytelling. It's not just entertainment, it's insulation. Not for your body, but for your brain. When the wind howls and your stomach is only half full, you wrap yourself in words. Tonight, it's your uncle's turn. He has 3 teeth and a memory that seems to get sharper the colder it gets. He launches into a tale about a baker who outwitted the devil by accidentally inventing sourdough. It's ludicrous, of course, but no one stops him. If you point out the inconsistencies, he'll just call you a heretic and keep going. Lutes and fiddles occasionally make an appearance, though most are poorly tuned and played even worse. Someone has a drum made from a pig skin stretched over a bucket. It sounds like a sad heartbeat. One girl sings lullabies that turn into eerie chants if you listen too closely. It's unclear whether she means to do that, but it works. The little ones fall asleep anyway. And riddles. So many riddles. You're terrible at them, which is part of the fun. The same ones get recycled each week, but nobody minds. There's comfort in the familiarity. What has a face but no eyes, a mouth but no speech? You mutter. The stew? Someone guesses. Everyone laughs. These evenings are also prime time for gossip, naturally. What did the Reeves wife really put in her winter tonic? Why did Father Aldrich stop mentioning St. Sebastian in sermons? Who exactly was spotted in the hayloft with the traveling tinker last full moon? None of it matters, but it all matters. Historians often note that oral storytelling was not just for entertainment, but for teaching. Tales of saints, fables, and cautionary tales were woven into everyday life. But they don't always capture the tone, the inside jokes, the way people pause dramatically, sip their broth, and then deliver the punchline. That's where the real magic is. Your neighbor, Bruna, the woman who once bit a goose on purpose, pipes up with a ghost story. Something about a knight's helmet haunted by regret. No one knows if she made it up, but you don't care. The shadows flicker on the walls, and your little brother hides under a blanket just in case the ghost is listening. There's a story you like best. It's about a girl who fell asleep during midwinter and woke up to find the snow whispering secrets. No one knows the ending. You think maybe that's the point. You sometimes add your own twists to old tales. Once you told the story of a peasant who tricked a tax collector into walking across a frozen pond to retrieve buried treasure. Everyone laughed. Someone added a bit where the taxman falls through and gets eaten by river fish with sharp teeth. The story keeps evolving, like stew that never quite finishes cooking. Even when it's too cold for instruments, you hum just a little. A low, droning tune that doesn't require skill, only breath. It fills the gaps between words like smoke filling the beams. Children are sprawled on the floor now, half asleep. One has her feet dangerously close to the fire. Someone gently tugs her back. The dog sighs. The embers glow. A mug is passed hand to hand like a relic. Then someone pulls out the story bones, a little bundle of carved wooden tokens used to prompt new tales. One is shaped like a rooster, another like a wheel. The last one, a face with no eyes. You roll them across the table and let fate decide tonight's direction. The rooster sparks a tale about a farmer who argued with his chickens. The wheel becomes a runaway cart. The faceless head? Someone makes it the spirit of lost dreams, which feels far too poetic for a group of people who just shared a fart joke. But that's how it goes. You swing between ridiculous and profound without meaning to. One moment, it's flatulence. The next, amusing on how the stars might be frozen lanterns from an older world. You never learned to write, and books are rare. But these nights are your library. Each story added, adapted, retold. Sometimes you whisper them to yourself in the barn. Sometimes you tell them to the goats. Sometimes they feel like the only thing you own that no one can take. Outside, the wind has died down. You can hear the crackle of frost on the roof, like the world is settling into sleep. One final story, someone says. You all agree, though final is rarely true. The tale stretches on, wrapping you in its rhythm like another woolen layer. The room grows quiet again. One by one, voices fade. Snores begin. A log collapses in the fire. You sit there, still awake, watching the embers and mouthing the last line of the story under your breath. And so she walked into the snow, not to leave, but to listen. It starts with a cough, not a loud one, just a dry, persistent tickle from the corner of the room where your cousin's been lying under 3 layers of wool and 1 cat for the past 2 days. You try to ignore it. Everyone does. But the thing about winter in a medieval village is when one person coughs, it usually becomes everyone's problem. Illness doesn't wait politely. It seeps into homes like smoke, riding the cold, lurking in damp corners, whispering from chapped lips and shared mugs. And here, in the tight, smoky warmth of a single-room cottage, Sickness spreads like fire through dry rushes. You side-eye your cousin and think, is it just a chill or is it the cough? Not plague, not the dramatic kind with cloaks and bells, but the quieter killers. Bronchitis, pneumonia, maybe lung fever, which sounds made up, but probably isn't. Medieval villagers didn't have germ theory, but they knew winter brought sickness. The going theory? Bad air, corrupted humors, a stomach too cold, spirits in the night. You've heard it all. Historians still argue whether peasants truly believed in humoral imbalance or simply repeated what monks and midwives told them. You don't know the science. But you do know that if you don't keep the fire going and your cousin's cough worsens, things could turn very bad, very quickly. You try one of the old tricks, warming a cloth with coals and laying it on the chest. It smells like old stew, but it seems to help. Someone brings over a jar of lard mixed with herbs. For the chest, they say, though what it's actually meant to do is unclear. And yes, you've got a leech guy in the village. Everyone does. Yours is named Bernard. He's cheerful in that unnerving way that suggests he enjoys his work a bit too much. If your cousin doesn't improve, someone will suggest calling him. You've already seen too many arms turn purple from one of Bernard's drainings. You sit beside the sickbed, wiping their brow with a rag that was once a shirt, and wonder how much elderberry syrup you have left. Not much. You're not even sure if it works, but it's sweet. And sometimes belief matters more than medicine. Meanwhile, life stumbles forward. You still have to haul water, still have to chop wood, still have to feed the animals. There's no time off for colds, yours or anyone else's. But everyone walks a little slower now, with shoulders hunched against both cold and the growing sense of what if? Someone sneezes into the stew pot. Everyone pretends it didn't happen. At night, you lie awake and listen. One wheeze, one snore, one child muttering fever dreams about spinning wheels and jam. You hear your mother whispering a prayer to Saint Sebastian, patron of plagues just in case. And your father, though less devout, mutters about needing more garlic. Good for the lungs, he says. Also good for repelling neighbors, you silently note. Odd winter remedies make an appearance. Onion skins are boiled into tea. A strange root called devil's turnip is tucked under pillows. Someone insists that wearing a red ribbon around your neck keeps the cough away. You wear one now just in case. It clashes terribly with your cloak. But fashion died months ago. And when all else fails, there's the sweat cure. You wrap the sick person in layers and layers, blankets, furs, every spare cloth in the house, and feed them hot broth until they glisten. Then you wait and hope and pray the fever breaks before the blanket combusts. Your neighbor across the lane lost her uncle last week. He'd been coughing since before solstice. No one talks about it loudly, but the fear spreads even faster than the sickness. You've seen people hang sprigs of dried rosemary over their doors, not for decoration, protection. One quirky remedy involves boiling ale with eggs and spices until it thickens like soup. It smells like despair, but seems to help. Sort of. Or at least it makes the patient too confused to complain. And always, someone blames the wind. Came from the east, they say. That kind always carries something foul. You nod. The wind needs no evidence. Still, despite all this, your cousin improves. The cough quiets. Color returns to their cheeks. There's no celebration, no toasts or cheers, just a slow exhale of relief. a grateful pat, and a fresh cup of water. Heated this time, not cold from the bucket. But not everyone is so lucky. You pass a cottage tomorrow morning and see the shutters closed in mourning, a black cloth tied to the door. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows. The cold doesn't just kill crops. It claims people, too. You return home, hug your cousin briefly, awkwardly as is tradition, and stoke the fire a little higher. You check the herbs, count the garlic cloves, and refill the water jar. Because winter's not done yet, and neither is the cough. Snow still blankets the village, thick as a wool cloak, and tonight the moon casts long blue shadows across the rooftops. You step outside briefly, your breath sharp and visible, just in time to hear the distant toll of the chapel bell. One soft chime for vespers, and another perhaps for a soul that's moved on. Faith in winter takes on a different texture. In summer, it's a thing of processions and open fields. In winter, it's bundled tight, whispered, clutched like a coal in the palm of your hand. The church, squat and lichen-covered, stands at the far end of the village like a stone anchor. Its walls are cold, but the candles still flicker bravely. You join the others on the path, trudging carefully so as not to slip. The snow crunches underfoot. Children cling to parents. Old women mutter prayers between teeth that never quite stop chattering. There's something communal about it, the way you all lean into the cold together, headed toward a bit of light. Tonight is a saint's feast, not one of the big ones. Saint Moore, maybe, or Saint Julian the Hospitaller. Someone who allegedly knew a thing or two about freezing rivers and divine hospitality. Inside the chapel, the air smells like beeswax and old stone. A few sprigs of holly still cling to the walls from Christmas. The priest, bundled in a patched robe that's seen better decades, recites the prayers with sleepy gravity. You follow along, mouthing words you've half memorized. You're not entirely sure what they mean, but the rhythm is soothing. A candle flickers beside a painted wooden icon of the Virgin, and you find yourself staring into her eyes for longer than usual. Historians often debate how deeply peasants engaged with church teachings, especially in the darker months. Some say the faith was shallow, more about rituals than belief. Others argue it was deeply felt, precisely because life was so uncertain. You're not sure where you fall, but when it's snowing sideways and you run out of onions, saying a quiet prayer can't hurt. After the prayers, the priest blesses everyone with holy water that's barely above freezing. You flinch as it hits your forehead. Behind you, someone sneezes loudly and blames it on demons. The priest does not dignify that with a response. Back outside, you pause. The sky is wide and cold and full of stars. You spot Orion, or at least a version of him your grandfather insists is a sheep with 3 tails. Stories bend in winter. You let it slide. There's another kind of faith that thrives this time of year, the old kind, the one whispered when the hearth burns low and the shadows grow long. You've heard stories since you were little, of spirits in the woods, of the wild hunt galloping through the sky, of fey creatures that slip into barns looking for spilled grain and unattended babies. Not everyone believes, but everyone acts like they do. You know not to whistle after dark. You know to leave a crust of bread on the windowsill during the longest night. You know not to thank someone for giving you fire, lest the gift be taken back. These aren't church rules. These are winter rules. There's a path past the chapel that leads into the woods. You don't go there after sundown. No one does. A boy did once on a dare. He came back white-lipped and silent, clutching a frozen apple in his fist. He never said what happened. The apple melted. So did his voice eventually. But the warning stuck. Even indoors, some still hang charms against the dark. Bits of rowan wood tied with red thread. Bread dough shaped like eyes. One woman in the village, old Lena with the crooked spine, still speaks to the fire as if it were a god. She claims to know which smoke means blessing and which means trouble. Tonight, your own hearth seems a little dim. You feed it a fresh log, whisper a half-joke about keeping the shadows out, and feel just slightly better. The flames brighten. The wind rattles the shutters but doesn't get in. Later, as you tuck into bed, someone hums an old hymn, something with only 3 notes, but 100 meanings. Your cousin crosses themselves 3 times before pulling the blanket over their head. The dog growls softly at nothing. Just the wind, you tell yourself. But still, you press a piece of iron under your pillow. It's probably just superstition, but it's also probably smart. You fall asleep with the sound of the priest's voice still echoing faintly in your ears, layered with the half-remembered warnings of the woods. Faith and fear, prayer and practice. They blend together like melted snow in the firewood pile. And for tonight, at least, they keep you safe. The cold has a rhythm now. It no longer shocks you. It just is. It lingers in the corners of the cottage, curls into your boots, settles in your knees when you squat too long by the fire, and yet, as the calendar creeps toward midwinter, something begins to shift. You can feel it in the food. Not more of it necessarily, but different. The usual broth and barley sludge are suddenly joined by spices, by meat, by things saved for just this moment. It's time for the feast before famine. Yule, midwinter, the 12 days. Whatever your village calls it, it's a pause, a brief warmth in the heart of the cold. And for a short while, you forget how low the grain sack has sunk, or how thin the onions have grown. Your mother has been planning for weeks, maybe months. A smoked ham has been hanging above the hearth for so long, it's become part of the decor. Now, it's gently lowered, brushed off, and eyed like a holy relic. Your aunt brings out a lump of aged cheese wrapped in linen that smells powerfully of both joy and feet. The goose, yes, a goose, was slaughtered just yesterday. You helped pluck it. Feathers everywhere. The dog ate 3 before anyone noticed. The meat is rubbed with salt, stuffed with herbs, and slowly roasted on a spit that turns by hand. Your cousin volunteers for the first hour, dreaming of grease-crackled skin. You'll take the second. This is the one time of year when even the poorest tables try for something grand. Pies if flour is available, maybe a honey cake if you've bartered well, and yes, ale. Even the small folk get ale now, weak but warm, and shared in wooden mugs passed between fire-warmed hands. Historians debate how lavish these feasts truly were for ordinary villagers. Some say they were simple affairs exaggerated by later romanticism. Others argue that even poor households scraped together what they could for a shared sense of ceremony, because the memory of celebration can feed you longer than bread alone. You help set the table, which in your case means smoothing a cleanish cloth over a plank and hoping the stool doesn't break again. People gather slowly, drawn by smell and laughter. Children bounce on the bench, wide-eyed at the sight of actual meat. Even the priest comes by, claiming to bless the table, but conveniently showing up just as the goose is carved. The meal begins with a prayer, simple, grateful, and slightly off-key. Then you eat. You eat like you haven't in months. The goose is greasy, crispy, and falls apart with a tug. The root vegetables are roasted rather than boiled, an extravagance. There's bread, fresh baked and still steaming. You slather it with drippings and pretend it's butter. A single apple slice sits at the center of the table. No one eats it. It's symbolic of what? No one remembers, but it's red and shiny, and someone once said, "It brings luck." You eat until your belly is tight and warm. Then you laugh. Then you drink. Then you sing. And the songs! You only know 3 of them properly, and most of the words have shifted over the years. One involves a goose who joins a monastery. Another, inexplicably, involves onions and lost shoes. Someone adds verses. Someone else falls asleep halfway through the chorus. No one minds. For just this night, the house feels full in a way that has nothing to do with space. There's warmth in your limbs, grease on your hands, music in your head. And outside, the snow keeps falling, but it no longer feels like a threat. Tonight, it's decoration. Even the dog is full, snoring by the fire, belly bulging slightly. The cat looks mildly offended to have been excluded from the ham, but she'll recover. Probably on your lap later. After the meal, you help scrape the bones into a pot. Nothing is wasted. Tomorrow, there will be soup. And the day after, and probably the day after that. But tonight was a feast. There's a tradition in your village. Simple, strange, and oddly touching. At the end of the feast, someone carries a small bowl of food out to the barn. Just a bit. For the animals. Not to feed them, though they appreciate it, but to thank them. For the eggs, the milk, the warmth, the companionship. You do this now, walking through the snow with a bit of roasted root and goose skin. You set it down near the goat pen. You nod at them. They blink at you. The exchange is complete. Then back inside, cheeks flushed and hands warm. Someone is retelling a story you've heard 100 times, but this time it feels richer. Maybe it's the ale. Maybe it's the goose. Or maybe, just maybe, it's that brief, bright sense that you've made it this far. Because the second half of winter is always harder. The stores will run low. The woodpile will shrink. The cold will bite deeper. But tonight, you've eaten like a lord. You've laughed like a fool. And you've remembered what it's like to feel full. Tomorrow, famine resumes its slow creep. But tonight, you feast. Children don't care about the cold quite the way adults do. At least, not at first. While you're busy calculating how long the firewood will last or how many turnips remain under the straw in the cellar, the little ones are outside hurling snowballs like it's a holy vocation. You watch them now through the frosted window, their shrieks muffled by the snow. They've bundled themselves in so many layers that they barely bend at the knees. One stumbles, then rolls theatrically downhill, giggling the whole way. Another is determined to build a snow ox, though it keeps collapsing into what looks more like a deformed turnip. Childhood in winter, especially in a medieval village, is a strange combination of wonder and work. 1 minute, you're being dragged on a sled made from a broken barrel lid. The next, You're hauling water from the well with hands so red they could be mistaken for pickled beets. There's no school to skip, only tasks to complete. The older children know what's expected. Feed the chickens. Gather eggs, if there are any. Help wind the spinning wheel. Mind the fire while the adults are off cutting wood. And yet, somehow, they find time for play. You remember when you were small, fashioning a sled from bundled sticks and sliding down the icy slope behind the blacksmith's cottage. You also remember landing directly in a patch of frozen dung. There was no faster way to learn where not to sled, or where the cows like to congregate. The games are simple: footprint tag, stick duels. Guess what I found frozen in the snow is a recurring favorite, equal parts game and mild horror. The prize is usually a rock or a dead vole. Either way, someone ends up shrieking. But it's not all joy. Frostbite is a real concern. You've seen children come in with fingers purpled from too much snow play, hands curled like claws until warmed by the fire, and sometimes there aren't enough mittens to go around. In those cases, sleeves are pulled over fingers and children blow on their hands constantly, like tiny smiths stoking invisible forges. Historians note that while children weren't exempt from hard labor, winter often offered brief reprieves. With the fields frozen, there's less agricultural work, but that doesn't mean rest. It just shifts the kind of chores. More weaving, more hauling, more helping. Inside the cottage, a younger sibling sits cross-legged on the floor, trying to untangle a ball of wool with an expression of deep 5-year-old concentration. They mutter threats at the yarn under their breath. Your grandmother chuckles and tells a story about when she was young and had to spin with her eyes closed to avoid going cross-eyed. Outside again, the wind picks up. The children don't notice at first, too busy piling snow against the side of the barn in a failed attempt to make a fort. But one finally catches the breeze full in the face and stops, just for a second. You watch him stand there, breath fogging, nose dripping, eyes wide as the realization of the cold creeps in. He runs inside moments later, boots thudding, cheeks flushed. "I'm not cold," he says loudly, shaking like a leaf. "I just came in for broth." You hand him a cup without saying a word. There are winter lullabies sung in your village, passed down through frost-bitten generations. Soft tunes about snow-covered trees, sleeping sheep, stars blinking behind clouds. Some don't have words anymore, just hums and murmurs. You find yourself humming one now as you settle the toddler down for a nap in the hay-stuffed cradle beside the fire. Some families tell stories of snow spirits who watch over children. Playful, sometimes mischievous, but quick to punish cruelty or laziness. You once threatened your little sister with the tale of a spirit who steals noses that aren't covered in scarves. She wore hers inside for a week. Children also play roles in the rituals of winter. During Yule, it's often the youngest who place the sprigs of greenery over doorways or help stir the solstice pot. Your brother got to light the Yule log last year, though technically it was already lit and he just waved a stick dramatically. He talks about it like he personally defeated the dark. And of course they get sick. They always do. One child begins coughing in the night, and the entire household leans in to listen. Not panic, just concern layered with tiredness. You bundle them closer to the fire, feed them warm broth, whisper old rhymes into their ear. They drift off, wrapped in wool and your worry. But the next morning, they're up again, running, laughing, face smeared with porridge. You smile despite yourself. Children bounce back better than the rest of us, or at least faster. By noon, they're back at it, sledding, shouting, throwing chunks of snow that might generously be called balls. You wince as one narrowly misses your stack of firewood. They flee, cackling, already planning the next attack. For them, winter is not a threat. It's a playground, a challenge, a friend that sometimes bites, but also lets them leave footprints in places adults avoid. They build snowmen shaped like monsters and laugh when their noses fall off. And at the end of the day, when the sun disappears behind the ridge and the wind cuts sharp again, they shuffle inside with blue lips and stiff limbs, complaining not about the cold, but about the dark. They want to play longer, just a little longer. You pat one on the head, peel off their wet cloak, and say the line you've heard 100 times before. There's always tomorrow. And if the weather allows, there really will be. By now, even the snow seems tired. It clings half-heartedly to rooftops, slumps off fence posts in soggy chunks, and has turned the village paths into a treacherous blend of slush and ice. But life rolls on, and with it comes a duty no one can avoid, not even when the wind threatens to blow the hat off your head. It's court day. You trudge toward the center of the village, squinting against a sun that offers no warmth. The village court, less a court and more a collection of very cold, very opinionated people, assembles beneath the old oak tree. It has no leaves now, only frost tracing its branches like brittle veins. Court sessions in winter are shorter, quieter, and far less dramatic than the summer ones. No one wants to be outside longer than absolutely necessary. The bailiff, wrapped in what might be a curtain-turned cloak, calls the crowd to attention in a voice that cracks like frozen thatch. He does not look pleased to be here, no one does. Yet, justice waits for no season. You shift your weight from foot to foot, trying not to slip on the packed snow. Around you, familiar faces gather. Most are hunched, bundled, and nursing half-frozen expressions of boredom. A few look worried. Maybe they're being accused of something today. Maybe they're just hoping they won't be called as a witness. Either way, everyone's breathing steam like exhausted dragons. Historians often paint manorial courts as purely administrative, a way for lords to enforce control and collect fines. And they're not wrong. But here, among the peasants, village courts were also social glue. Gossip became evidence. Feuds got aired. Occasionally, actual crimes were judged. More often, it was arguments over fences, stolen turnips, and whose goat really ate whose socks. Today's first case, a boundary dispute. Two neighbors arguing over a hedge that allegedly moved sometime after the first snowfall. The witness, an old woman who remembers where the frost line was. You stifle a snort. She gestures with a stick. Everyone nods like this makes perfect sense. Next up, a fine for public drunkenness. It was Yule. The accused points this out. The reeve raises an eyebrow and says that stealing the bell from the chapel and using it as a hat was not part of the celebration. The crowd chuckles. The fine is halved. Then a more serious matter, a pig that went missing and turned up roasted in someone else's stew. That gets attention. The accused swears he found the pig already roasted, which may be the most ambitious excuse you've heard this winter. He is sentenced to return the bones and apologize. No one is quite sure what that will accomplish. The cold doesn't stop the sarcasm. One case involves a man who claimed another cursed his crops. With what words exactly? The steward asks. The man shrugs and mutters something about evil squinting. A formal warning is issued about squinting with intent to curse. Punishments, when they come, are usually fines, measured in coins, goods, or labor. Stocks are rare in winter. No one wants to freeze their backside to a wooden bench for petty theft. Instead, you might be ordered to shovel paths, break ice at the well, or chop wood for the parish widow. Public service, medieval style. You notice a boy about 12 being questioned over a broken cartwheel. He insists the wheel broke on its own. His brother claims it was sabotaged by ice goblins. The court thanks him for his creativity, then fines their father a half-day's labor. There's one curious case that gets whispered about as it's called forward. A woman accused of listening to the wind too closely. No one really knows what that means. She claims she was trying to hear when her husband would return from the mill. The reeve dismisses it, but not before someone quietly crosses themselves. Winter makes everything a little weirder. Once the last complaint has been heard, the steward thanks the crowd for their frozen patience and encourages everyone to go warm up before their noses fall off. You're not sure if that's a legal order, but no one argues. As people disperse, a few linger to talk. Court days are rare chances to catch up. You overhear updates about who still has turnips, who needs firewood, and who's secretly feeding a stray cat inside their barn. You nod, smile, and slip away before someone volunteers you for something. On the way home, you replay the proceedings in your mind. They weren't exciting, but they mattered. They reminded everyone that even in the coldest months, the rules still held. That fairness, however drafty and frost-bitten, still had a place. And when you returned to your cottage, thawing hands by the hearth, you realized something. It wasn't just about justice. It was about visibility, about making sure no one slipped too far into silence during the long dark. In a season where people vanish behind shuttered windows and snowdrifts, court day forces the village to see itself. The cold is bad, sure, but the stories are worse. You've heard them since childhood. Tales muttered by firelight when the wind groans against the shutters and the snow falls in sideways sheets. They're not the kind of stories told with flair and laughter. These are whispered, half-believed, and never quite discredited. Because winter, more than any other season, breeds fear. Tonight, it's especially cold, the kind that stings your skin even indoors. You add another log to the fire and glance at the door, as if expecting it to open itself. It doesn't. Good. Someone mentions wolves. It's always wolves first. They've been spotted again near the tree line, large dark shapes moving low to the ground. You remember last winter when a piglet went missing. There were tracks, they said, long, deep, too many to count. The reeve offered a reward for proof, but no one ever caught one. Still, everyone agreed it had to be wolves. Wolves are real enough, but then come the others. The old woman down the path says the frost sings her name at night, that she once saw footprints appear in the snow without a body to make them. Her cottage is always a bit colder than everyone else's, even in summer. People joke that she angered a spirit. No one jokes too loudly. Tonight, your cousin is retelling the story of the nightman. He only comes when the wind shifts west, they say. tall as a tree, with a face made of ash and breath that freezes your soul. He walks the roads in silence, looking for doors left open and fires burning low. If he finds one, he steps inside. You check the latch again, just in case. There are creatures in the forest, too. Not animals, things. They wear the shape of deer, but walk upright when no one's looking. You once heard a story about a man who followed flickering lights into the trees and returned with his mouth frozen shut. He never spoke again. Now he points a lot, mostly at corners. Historians note that medieval Europe was filled with folklore and local spirits, many of which merged with Christian ideas over time. But winter, more than any season, kept those older stories alive. Cold nights and long shadows make fertile ground for fear. And of course, there are the witches. Every village has at least one name whispered when the milk sours or the fire won't start. In yours, it's a woman named Jetta who lives alone near the stream. She speaks to birds. She always has garlic. Her cat has one eye. That's enough. Jetta was accused once, years ago, after a cow birthed twins and then dropped dead. The village elders decided it was bad luck. Jetta said nothing, just stood there with her arms folded and a look like smoke. You avoid her when you can, and when you can't, you nod politely and say nothing about her eyes. Tonight, someone is talking about the knocking. 3 taps at the door just before dawn. Always 3. Always quiet. You're not supposed to open it. If you do, they say, the cold that enters won't leave. It settles in your bones, in your mind, in your house. You stare at your door a little too long after hearing that one. Some of it's nonsense, sure. Just things people say when the stew is thin and the fire burns low. But still, you find yourself turning your shoes the safe way when you take them off. You throw a pinch of salt in the hearth on feast days. You never whistle after dark. Fear becomes ritual. Ritual becomes comfort. You remember when you were a child listening to a story about the snow bride, a spirit who appears in blizzards dressed in white. She knocks at windows and sings sad songs. If you open the door to her, she thanks you and leaves. Then your hearth goes cold for a year. You still check the windows on stormy nights, just in case she's humming. The dog growls now, not loud, just a low rumble from the fire's edge. You look over, its ears are up, eyes on the door. Nothing else moves. You wait. Nothing happens. After a moment, the dog settles again, curling tighter. You exhale. You didn't even know you were holding your breath. Someone makes a joke to break the silence. Something about witches stealing socks, or spirits who demand better stew. You laugh. Everyone laughs. The fire flares up as if joining in. Outside, the wind howls louder. It does that sometimes. Finds a crack in the roof and sings through it. One long high note that sounds too much like a voice. You wrap your blanket tighter. You remind yourself, the wolves are real. The spirits, probably not. But still, you close the shutters properly. You tuck your feet in. You check the fire twice. And you whisper goodnight to no one in particular. Because winter is listening. This morning, the river has frozen, properly frozen, not just the thin crust that cracks under a stone's weight, but a thick, glassy sheen that stretches from bank to bank. You squint across it as you haul a bundle of wool to the edge of town, wondering just how many feet have tested that ice in the last day. Turns out, more than you thought. By mid-morning, half the village is on it. Children slide squealing from one end to the other, arms flailing like windmill blades. The blacksmith's apprentice is attempting to race a dog and losing badly. And at the far end, a group of traders are setting up a line of stalls on the ice itself. It's not madness, it's tradition. And it means winter's strangest joy is here, a frost fair. Not every year gets one. The freeze has to be deep and long and kind enough not to crack under foot traffic. But when it happens, the villagers know exactly what to do. Lay planks, set up booths, and barter like spring depends on it. You clutch your sack of wool and step gingerly onto the ice. It creaks as if greeting you, and your toes instinctively curl in protest. But the surface holds, always does, for now. Wool is in demand, not for new tunics, no one's thinking fashion, but for patching old ones. A trader offers you dried leeks in exchange. You haggle because leeks don't patch cloaks, but they do fill soup pots. In the end, you leave with 3 shriveled bulbs and a smile that almost reaches your ears. Historians sometimes downplay how vibrant winter economies could be in rural villages. Yes, travel was harder. Yes, roads were frozen, treacherous, or gone. But rivers, those became highways. Ice was opportunity. Markets like this one were rare, yes, but when they happened, they were bright spots in an otherwise gray stretch of days. The next stall sells onions. Not fresh, of course. Nothing is, but firm enough to last another week. You trade a pair of hand-spun mittens for 6. A good deal, considering how your last pair of mittens mysteriously vanished after your brother's sudden interest in outdoor snowball diplomacy. Next to the onion vendor is a tinker selling spoons made of tin and dreams. He tells a joke for every sale, whether you want it or not. You buy 1 spoon and receive a truly terrible rhyme about a chicken who married a kettle. The rhyme isn't worth repeating, but the spoon is solid. Further down, a woman has laid out dyed threads, bright as summer berries. You stare too long at a blue skein, the color of deep water, and she notices. "Trade," she says, eyes sharp as frost. You offer a carved button, worn smooth by years of fastening the same cloak. She considers, then nods. The thread disappears into your pocket like treasure. Even the Lord Steward makes an appearance, wrapped in furs that smell faintly of incense and superiority. He buys nothing, but watches closely. Word is, he's making sure no one sells unauthorized venison. Everyone pretends not to have any. Everyone also knows that one stall's wild sausage came from a deer that was definitely, absolutely 100% not poached. Probably. The ice groans as a group of young men start dragging a sled across it loaded with firewood. You wince at the sound, not because it's unsafe, but because you carried that same firewood across frozen ground yesterday with only a rope and determination. Sled envy is real. Food stalls appear slowly. Someone's boiling cabbage with pepper. Someone else offers flatbread crisped on an iron plate. A girl sells warm ale in little wooden cups, thin but sweetened with honey. You buy one and nurse it while watching your neighbors slip, barter, and laugh. For a few hours, the whole village forgets the hunger hiding in their cellars. The cold's still there, biting, unkind, but no one's paying it much mind. Not when you can buy a pair of worn boots for 2 smoked trout, or swap a broken ladle for 3 songs and a dried pear. You join in a game that involves sliding a coin across the ice toward a carved target. Your coin spins wildly, veers left, and ends up in a snowdrift. You laugh. A stranger claps you on the back. You clap them back. It's all part of the ritual. And then come the travelers. A sleigh pulls up along the bank, pulled by two shaggy ponies, hooves wrapped in straw to muffle the sound. The driver is wrapped in layers that make him look like a moving hay bale. He sells bolts of coarse cloth, dried apples, and tiny iron knives. You buy nothing, but linger by his sleigh asking questions. He tells you the rivers further north are frozen too. That one village had a market with dancing bears. You ask if he's serious. He shrugs and smiles. You decide to believe him. By mid-afternoon, the sun is low. People begin packing up. The stalls are folded down, sleds reloaded, footprints scattered across the ice like breadcrumbs. You carry your leeks, thread, and new spoon home in a sack that feels oddly satisfying, like you've accomplished something more than survival today. That night, over thin stew, now with leeks, you share your spoils. Your father admires the spoon. Your sister claims the blue thread. The leeks go in the pot. The story about the dancing bears is told twice. Once truthfully, once with very creative embellishments involving juggling. Outside, the river creaks in the dark. Tomorrow, it may thaw, or it may hold another day. No one knows. But for now, it gave you a moment of brightness. And in winter, that's everything. There's a sound you haven't heard in weeks. It's not the crunch of snow, not the howling of wind, and not the creak of frozen wood under your boots. It's softer, almost unnoticeable unless you're listening closely. But once you hear it, everything in your body leans forward. Drip, just one at first, then another, and then it begins, slow, hesitant, but unmistakable, melting. You step outside and tilt your head toward the eaves. There it is, a thin thread of water tracing its way down from a snowbank on the thatched roof, darkening the wall below. You run your fingers over it. It's ice cold and gone in an instant, but it leaves a grin on your face. The first thaw isn't a grand affair. It doesn't sweep in with trumpets and birdsong. It sneaks, it hums, it leaks, and for a while, it's more mess than miracle. The paths turn to slush. The well is surrounded by mud, and every child in the village comes home coated in brown from knee to ankle. But still, it's something. Inside, the hearth burns a little lower now, not from neglect, but from a kind of cautious optimism. You catch yourself wondering if you can stretch the firewood just a bit longer, save a few logs for the still cold nights of March. Your mother hums while mending a sock. A hopeful tune? One that only surfaces when the cold begins to lift. Your father checks the roof for leaks and doesn't complain once. Even the goats seem perkier. One tries to eat the laundry again, which you take as a sign of normalcy returning. With the thaw comes the return of strange rituals. You've already seen them begin. The neighbor girl swept her doorstep sunwise 3 times this morning. To invite the warmth, she said. A boy pressed a sprig of holly into the thawed mud and whispered something to it. Probably nonsense, but said with such sincerity it almost counts as a prayer. You're not above such things yourself. You hang your cloak by the door, not over the fire, letting it dry honestly, as your grandfather used to say. You also toss a pinch of salt over your shoulder before stirring the morning porridge. Not for seasoning, but for luck. Historians debate how much of this seasonal behavior was religious versus superstitious. But in your village, there's no clear line. You can light a candle for St. Cuthbert and scatter oats for the field spirits in the same breath. One for the church, one for the soil, just in case. Someone brings out the spring charm, a bundle of dried flowers tied with red thread, kept hidden all winter in the loft. It's cracked and faded, but it still smells faintly of sunshine. You take a whiff. It's probably just dust and dried thyme, but you close your eyes and pretend it's June. The children begin a new game. Ice step, hopping between the shrinking patches of snow without touching the bare ground. They claim it offends the snow spirits if you move too quickly into the season. You're fairly sure they made this rule up on the spot, but you play along. The elders, though, don't celebrate quite yet. They remember winters that returned with a vengeance just when you thought they were over. Sudden storms, killing frosts, the cruel trick of March pretending to be April. So they keep their coats close, their prayers quiet, and their wood piles guarded like treasure. One old man spits into the thawing mud and mutters, "Not fooled this year." Then he goes back inside, muttering still. Still, the signs gather. The chickens start laying again. Just one egg, small and hesitant, but a beginning. The trees don't bud, not yet, but you swear the bark looks less dead. You hear birds at dawn, only two, and off-key. But it's more music than you've heard since Yuletide. The church bell rings with a slightly higher tone. Someone says, "The cold made it dull before." Someone else says the priest finally oiled it. You don't care either way. It sounds like movement. There's a curious little ceremony you help with every year. The blessing of the mud. That's not the official name, of course, but that's what everyone calls it. The priest walks through the village holding a sprig of evergreen, sprinkling water on patches of thawed earth. He prays. Children follow behind, mimicking his words and occasionally slipping in the mud. Afterward, people collect the sprinkled soil and rub it on their boots. For luck, for a good planting season, or maybe just because it feels right. You take your turn, kneeling to press your palm into the wet earth. It's cold, yes, but it's not frozen. That alone is enough. Back home, you open the shutters fully for the first time in weeks. The light pours in, slanted and still pale, but real. The air smells different, like wet wood, moss, and possibility. You breathe deep, and it almost hurts. Not from cold, from memory. You remember summers past, bare feet in dust, warm bread, bees dozing on window ledges, and for a flicker of a moment, the still frozen garden outside seems less hopeless, less distant. You'll still need firewood tomorrow. The soup will still be thin. The snow might return. But today, the ice dripped, and that's enough. You remember this winter? Not the one you're in, but that winter. The one everyone still talks about in half whispers and unfinished sentences. The winter that changed everything. You were younger then, though not by much. The kind of young where you still thought spring was a guarantee and the food stores would always last just one more week. That winter disabused you of that notion. It came early. The first snow fell before All Saints' Day, and the frost that followed turned the earth to iron. Nothing grew. The onions froze in the ground. The turnips split. Even the cabbages, tough as they are, turned black at the edges. People said they'd seen it before, that bad winters came in cycles. But as the days shortened and the cold deepened, even the elders began to look worried. You remember one saying, "When the mice leave the barns, it's time to pray." The mice had already left. You rationed early, thinner stew, less bread. Firewood burned slower, though that might have been imagination. You wore every layer you owned, and still the cold found you. And then came the snowstorm. A real one. Not a gentle flurry or a wind-blown dusting. This one buried everything. Paths vanished. Doors froze shut. A neighbor lost a roof. Another lost a child, only 6 winters old. No one spoke for a week. You remember hearing your aunt crying into the firelight. Historians have debated which winter it might have been. Perhaps the great famine years in the early 1300s, when the weather turned strange across all of Europe. Or maybe a local event, one your village recorded only in memory, not parchment. It doesn't really matter. You lived it. That's record enough. And something shifted after that. People grew cautious, quiet. Faith deepened in some, cracked in others. You recall how a traveling monk passed through with a box of relics and a sermon full of thunder. People gave him cheese. Someone gave him a boot. Everyone wanted protection. There were no frost fairs that year. The river froze too hard and then cracked wide open without warning. A cart plunged through. The horse drowned. The driver was pulled out, half frozen, eyes wide like he'd seen something in the dark water that shouldn't have been there. But it wasn't just the cold or the hunger that changed things. It was the way people treated each other. Some grew kinder. You remember how the widow down the lane took in 2 children whose parents hadn't made it. She fed them bread dipped in broth and wrapped them in blankets patched from her late husband's tunics. She died that spring, but the children lived. Others turned inward. You saw neighbors hoard wood behind false walls, heard the arguments, fights over dried apples. A man stabbed another over a sack of barley so old it sprouted mold when it hit water. He claimed it was self-defense. The court claimed it was desperation. That winter redrew the village. Some cottages were never reopened, some paths never retread. You pass those places still, the tumbled roof line, the stone hearth with no house around it. Ghosts don't live there, but memories do. You also remember the small miracles. One morning, a pot of frozen soup fell into the fire and cooked itself while no one was watching. That was the best meal you'd had in days. Another time, a chicken returned after being assumed eaten by wolves. She laid eggs for 3 weeks and became a local legend. You named her Perseverance. She never forgave you. And then, finally, the thaw. Not the early hint, the real one. When the snow slid from rooftops like silk and the air smelled of wet grass and old hope. You cried that day, though you'd never admit it. Everyone did, not out loud, but quietly, in the way they lifted their faces to the sun like starved plants. Since then, you've prepared differently. You store more wood, you count every sack, you preserve extra garlic, not just for cooking, but for comfort. You teach the younger ones how to mend clothes, how to trap warmth in layers. You tell them stories, but you never exaggerate. The truth is, caution enough. Even now, in this gentler winter, you watch the sky, listen to the wind, take no warmth for granted. But you also notice what's returned. Laughter, small jokes told over stew, songs sung a bit louder. The dog snores again, and you smile. The hearth flickers, not just with need, but with ease. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, not because you're cold, but because you remember being colder. You still walk past the old ruins, the half-burned barn, the crumbling cottage, but now there's moss on the stones, and someone's planted herbs where the doorstep used to be. A quiet tribute, a promise that nothing, not even the worst winter, lasts forever. That winter changed everything. But it didn't end you, and that's something worth carrying. The snow today is soft, not fresh, but softened by time and sun. It sags gently along the eaves, lingers only in shaded corners, and puddles slowly in wheel ruts near the chapel path. Even the trees look relaxed, branches easing back into their proper angles, no longer bowed with weight. There's still cold in the air, yes, but it doesn't press on your chest like it used to. You step outside and realize, without fully knowing when it happened, that you can breathe deeply again without wincing. This is the stillness at season's end. The fire still burns, but not out of panic. You keep it lit because it's home now, not just heat. The way it crackles in the quiet has become as familiar as a sibling's snore. You still tend it carefully, but without that tight urgency behind your eyes. You're no longer counting the logs in dread, you're just counting. The food stores are nearly gone, but somehow it's less terrifying. A few wrinkled apples, a knot of dried herbs, one last onion that feels more air than substance. And still, your stomach grumbles less than it did 2 weeks ago. Not because you're fuller, but because hope has begun to take the edge off. The animals stir more. The hens cluck just a little louder. You saw the goat stretch this morning, legs stiff from months indoors, but with a twinkle of mischief in her step. You grinned before you could stop yourself. You've made it. Not just through the coldest nights or the hungriest days, but through the long silence in between. That part no one talks about. The hours where nothing happens except the slow, invisible work of enduring. The village feels different now, too. Less hunched, less holed up. Doors are open a crack more often. Neighbors stop to talk, even if it's just to complain about the mud. You welcome the sound. It reminds you that your world extends beyond this one room, this one hearth. There's always cleaning to do after winter. Ash has settled in places it shouldn't. The rafters drip. The corners stink faintly of whatever you were too tired to clean in January. But you move through the mess slowly, deliberately. You even whistle. You're not the only one. Children are outside again, not bundled, just wrapped. Their laughter is louder now, clearer. Someone's tried to build a snowman again, but it collapsed sideways and now looks more like a smug turnip. It gets a name anyway. The old stories have shifted. Less fear, more fondness. Someone retells the tale of the wind knocking 3 times, but this time it just wanted stew. The night man now wears slippers. The deer spirits have started gardening. You laugh. You all do. You walk the edge of the garden plot in the afternoon light, boots sinking gently into softening ground. You bend down and press a finger into the soil. It holds, then yields. Not much, but enough. Enough to say, soon, inside, you count your carrots. 3. One is definitely past its prime. One looks suspiciously like a parsnip, but they're yours. They represent everything you've done this winter, the choices, the effort, the endless discipline of rationing, of resisting panic. You place them in a basket, lined with cloth, like they're jewels. And in a way, they are. Later, as the light fades, you find yourself back at the hearth. not from cold, but habit. You poke the coals and listen to them sigh. The fire doesn't roar, it murmurs now, gentle, tired, familiar. You sit back. The shutters are open just a little. The last snow falls outside, slow and quiet and delicate, just enough to hush the world. No wind, no fear, just silence. You breathe it in like it's something rare, something sacred. The season is ending. You've seen it through, and now it's time to rest. Word count, 1056. Wind down, 300 words. The fire glows low now, painting soft orange shapes against the wall. Your hands rest quietly in your lap, and your breathing has slowed without you even noticing. The sounds of the village, wood creaking, distant laughter, a dog's sleepy sigh fade into the background, replaced by the even hum of night settling in. Outside, the last few snowflakes drift lazily through the air, catching the moonlight just enough to shimmer before disappearing. You don't hear them land. You don't need to. You know they're falling, gentle and unhurried, like everything else tonight. Your home, small and humble, holds its own quiet warmth now, not just from the hearth, but from the season endured, from everything it took to reach this point. Every turnip counted, every log split, every moment of stillness you carried like a flame in cupped hands. You've made it. Through the deep cold, through the silence, through the weight of a winter that asked more than it gave. Now, your body begins to loosen. Shoulders drop, jaw unclenches. There's nothing left to do tonight. No more water to carry, no more stew to stir. Just warmth, just rest. Outside, a new season waits, softly, patiently. But for now you stay still. Let the fire hum. Let your breath slow. Let sleep come gently, like snow falling on a quiet roof. You're safe. You're warm, and winter is behind you.